streaming. The other thing, just for notes at the beginning of class, next week there is no class because it's Thanksgiving, so don't show up. I won't be here. You're more than welcome to come here to the college if you want, but I will not be here. So, okay, so what we're doing today, last week we were dealing, just starting to understand how to work with Mongo using Mongoose. Today we're going to extend off of that and actually start doing like some forms. Last week we were just doing everything straight from URLs and everything was hard-coded, whereas this week we're actually going to create some forms and be able to do some post requests to insert some data, some editing, and stuff like that. So, okay, so if I open up my terminal and I go to Monday's class, actually what I'm going to do is I'm going to use last week's code because obviously we don't like to do things more than once. So GitHub has a very handy feature of being able to clone a repository in different ways. One sec. Excuse me. And let's make sure okay. So if you go to your repositories on GitHub, and last week we did COMP2068 F2019 week 5. So this was the code that we wrote last week. And if I go under settings, there's actually a setting that allows you to use this as a template repository. And what this means is you can let users generate new repositories with the same directory structure and files. You can kind of think of it similar to using Express Generator, except this is going all through GitHub, and it will keep all of the commits and all that sort of stuff. So you can click template repository, and then when you go back to your code, you'll see that there will be a new green button that says use this template. So this will let you create a brand new repository with whatever name that you want. I'm going to call it COMP2068 F2019 week 6 because I'm very original. Okay, and it's going to be a public repository. So I'm going to create from template. So it has to generate it, just takes a little bit, depending on how large your repository is. If you've pushed up your node modules, it might take a little bit longer to push that up, but it should be pretty instant. Oh, and I was incorrect, sorry. It does not keep your GitHub commit that is when you fork a repository. So in this one, we'll have a commit that just says initial commit with all of our code from last week. So then to download it, you can just go to clone and click this little copy button. And then the command to doing it in the command line to download is git clone and then that URL. So just the URL that's in there, and it will create the folder for us. You can see right here, it says COMP2068 F2019 week 6. So I will go into there, and I will also paste in the Slack. Okay. So we have our code from last week. In order to get it running, because I don't push up my node modules, the first thing I have to do is npm install. So that way it downloads all the dependencies that's inside of our package JSON. So I can type in npm install, or if you're really lazy, you can just do npm space I, and that aliases to install. But it will install everything that we need. So now I can just type in npm start. We should get a message, although it looks like we are not getting it, probably because of my settings. So if I open up the code, we'll see what's going on first. So let's open it up. Oh, I want to open it up in the current one that I have. All right. So if I zoom this in and we go to our app.js, oh, I don't think I pushed up all of the code from last week. Oh, that's too bad. Okay. Did I not? Routes, we have our model. So that's there. And then inside app.js, we don't have, okay. So we're gonna have to write some stuff from scratch, which is good. We can get some quick experience with this. So, okay, so the project is downloaded. And if I type in npm start again and go to localhost 3000, we get our Express application. So because we already have our model created, or at least I already have it created from last week, what we're going to have to do is require in Mongoose into our app.js file so that way we can connect to our Mongoose database. So in order to do that, we type in var mongoose equals require mongoose. So this is just requiring it into our application so that way we can create a connection to our database. And in order to do that, we do mongoose.connect, and the first one is a string, and the second one is a object. And there were two parameters that it wants us to use, which is use new URL parser, which is true, and use, I believe it was this unified topology, which is also true. So, okay, so to get this string, what we have to do is we have to connect, we have to open up Mongo Atlas, which is what we're using for our cloud-hosted MongoDB database. So I am going to log into it. So Mongo Atlas, you can just Google it. It'll pop up hopefully at the top. Go to sign in. Sign in with my email and my password. And then as last week, I'll go to connect. And right here, it's giving me some warnings, just letting me know that I can't connect because I don't have any firewall access or users created in my application. So I'm just going to do add my current IP address. We'll just add that. And then I'm going to create a user, which last week I used test and then test. So I will also create that. And then I can click choose connection method. So we're connecting an application because we're connecting our application that we're creating. We're not using Compass and we're not using Mongo Shell. So you can click connect your application and copy this string that's right here. So we can paste that into our mongoose.connect and replace the password right here with our actual password, in this case being test. Now I want to do var db equals mongoose.connection. And this way we can listen to our connection, and upon connecting, we'll console log to the terminal to let it know that we've made a connection. And if there's an error, then we'll also console log that just to let them know. So we'll say db.on error, and we'll say console.log there was an error connecting. And then we'll also say db.once, and I believe it's, what is it? Mongoose connection once open. So once open, then we'll also console log saying we have connected to Mongo Atlas. And that's it. That's the only part that we need for doing our connection. Everything else will just be the code that we're going to be writing for our CRUD. So I can test this by running npm run dev. And it says mongoose.connection is not a function. So I just do var db equals mongoose.connection, no params on it, no parentheses. And now it says we have connected to Mongo Atlas. So that's good. So we can test this by going into our index.js file. And last week we were working with articles. So you can see that under our models, we have an article. And if I require in our model, so var article equals require, go back to our models, and then article. And when we go to our index page, instead of rendering our index.pug file, I'm going to do article.find.then articles. And this is a little fast, but this is just making sure that we're connected properly. We'll do res.json articles. So what this is doing is it's calling the find function from article, which is given to us by Mongoose, so that way we don't always have to write, like a select statement or an update statement. So we can just use find, and without any parameters, it will find all articles. It then returns a promise, which in this case is going to be an array of all the articles. And then I do res.json saying that I'm going to respond back in JSON format with all of the articles from our Mongoose database. So if I go to Express and restart, we are getting an error. Cannot do raw queries on admin in Atlas. OK. So that might be a Mongo Atlas error. So let me just go to my users and just see what's going on here. Database access, edit. We want this to be read and write, update user. And cancel, restart. What is going on? Cannot do raw queries on admin in Atlas. So let's just try giving it an empty object. Sometimes that will work. Let's try this one more time. Cannot do raw queries on admin in Atlas. All right. So what seems to be the problem? That looks all right. I swear this is the same code that we wrote last week. Let me try doing it as an async function. We'll see if that changes anything. So we'll say const articles equals await article.find, and then res.json articles, and we'll throw a catch. We'll say console.error, error, and then we'll return an empty array. See what happens then. So we get an empty array. So it's still getting an error. Cannot do raw queries on admin in Atlas. Hold on, let's see what this is. Okay, let's try this one more time. I'm just going to copy the connect string one more time, just make sure. Copy into our app. Let's just see if there's any changes. Yeah, I'm wondering if maybe that's it right here. Let's try this one more time. Like it should be using this this database right here. So maybe if I click into it, click connect, does it do anything different? So it still says admin. It says test on yours? Interesting. So we'll just try changing it to test and see if that does anything. So test. This is here. So that still says no, didn't look like there was any errors. If I go into collections, retrieving a list of databases and collections. So I do see that we have a database that's called test. So connects with test. Let's refresh this one more time. Still no error. Oh, hold on. We deleted our articles last week. So that's actually correct. If I were to insert a new article, let's insert a document of test is true, and we'll just keep that as a string. We'll insert the document, refresh, and here we go. So okay, so it's connected. If for some reason on your end it does have that admin string, just replace it with a different value. Essentially what it's saying is it wants to connect to a database. You can't connect to the admin database, but you can create, if you replace that string right here. So after it says mongodb.net/, this test right here is the name of the database. And if I put in any other value and save that, it should not have an issue. And if I refresh in Mongo Atlas, it will probably, if I refresh here, we'll now get another database. Oh, no, it didn't create it. But if I created a new record, it probably would. So anyway, this is just the name of the database. So I called mine test. If yours isn't working, just try whatever. And we'll try to figure it out if it's not working. I don't know why, for some reason, they changed it. Maybe I did something weird. But okay, so we know that we're connected because we're able to get back the records from the database. Because when I refresh the screen, we can see the JSON coming back with one record that says test is true, has an ID and a date. So let's remove that code and we'll go back to our index page. So if we refresh that, it says express. So because I did not do this last week, what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to do a git commit and say git commit add everything and say init of the database connection. I will push that up. Okay. So it's pushed up. So now next week, or technically not next week, in the next class that we'll have, we can just now use this repository that we're doing this week to continue working so that way we don't have to reinitialize a connection to our database.
But since you did a push, can we pull this down now?
Mm-hmm. Yep, you're able to pull it down onto your machine.
With the git pull or with that?
You can either do a git clone because it's a public. Yeah. But if you've cloned it already, you should be able to just pull it, I believe. Yeah. What was the question there? Sorry? You're welcome to use my database. Just try not to be inappropriate. So, okay. So the site's not working because I'm not running it. put these side by side. So now what I need to do is just put in a basic navigation. I'm not going to bother installing Bootstrap into it as of right now, even though it's fairly fast. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put in some nav links. So I can do that by modifying my layout.pug. So in here, I'm going to just do a UL with an LI with an anchor href to slash that says home. And this is another syntax that you can do. You can do a colon if you know that nothing is going to go inside of that LI except for the thing right beside it. It's a little shorthand syntax instead of having to do this. I just prefer to do it all on one line for all my list items for this. So I'm going to have a home. I'm going to have slash articles, which will go to here. And that's all I'll have right now. Once we're inside the articles page, then we can actually start creating some new links inside of our router. So, okay, so if I refresh, we're getting an error because I have tabs and spaces. Convert to tabs. Refresh. Okay, there we go. So I have this really ugly nav bar with home and slash articles. Right now, if we click slash articles, we'll get a 404 because we haven't set up the route. Our application doesn't know how to handle the slash articles route. So in order to do this, we could do one of two things. Inside of our index.js route file, we could add a route for slash articles, or what is better, because we're going to be doing a lot of different routes off of slash articles, we're going to create a new articles router. So that way it can hold all of the logic for modifying, creating, updating, and well, I said modifying and updating, but creating, reading, updating, and deleting articles inside of our application. So how we can go about doing that, like we've done in other classes, is under our routes folder, I'm going to create a article.js. Or actually, it'll be articles.js. It doesn't really matter, but because it's for the articles plural route, I'm going to name the file articles plural. So in order to have the basic bare bones, again, of a new route file, we need 3 lines. We need to require in express. We need to create a router instance. So we do express.router, which is a function that returns us a router object. And then we do module.exports equals router. And actually, I usually prefer to do router in lowercase, just my preference. And that's it. That's the bare bones of being able to set up a router. Georgian's a little slow to the game. They just sent out a email letting us know Blackboard's down. Good thing that we already know that. Let's see if they know how long it's going to be. No additional details available at the moment. Exciting. So in other words, they send an email and they have no idea what's going on. All right. So in order to create our index page for our articles route, we'll do router.get slash and then request response next. And we're just going to do res.send working. So we just send back in plain text the word working. So if we hit this route, then we know that it's working. So if you wanted to try it out and you said, okay, I set up my router, if I go to slash articles and it still doesn't work. Reason for this is because we created a brand new route and we're not using it in our application. You can think of it as a file that isn't being imported anywhere. So our application doesn't know how to use this file. So what I'm going to do is under app, right here we have var index router and our users router. We're just going to actually get rid of the users router. We don't need it. But what we can do is just replace some of the text for it. So I'm going to replace users and say articles. and replace routes users with articles as well. So this is our /articles router. And then I can use it down below, right here, where we say app.useUsers. We'll change that to saying articles, and then put articles router. So okay, we're using our articles router on the articles route. So now we should not get an error. So it says working. So if for some reason your application is not working, if you're following along on your computer, make sure that one, you're using it in your app.js and you're importing the right file. And then if for some reason that's not working, make sure in your routes that you have these three main things: your express router, and then your exporting. And of course, if you don't set up the route right here, it won't work, but the bare that you need is that part.
Just a quick question.
Yep.
So in router.get slash, you actually, it's router.get /articles.
Yes.
Okay,
Because inside of our app.use, it's a prefix of /articles. So in order to load in our articles, what we need to do is we need to import our article model. So most websites that you're probably familiar with that have articles is you have kind of two main pages. You have your list view, which is going to be a list of all the articles. Typically it has like a preview, maybe an image, title, author, date, that kind of thing. And then you have a details page. Or if anyone's kind of more familiar with WordPress, sometimes you have it called an archive page and your single page. So your archive is going to be a list of multiple articles, and then you have a single page, which is just a details page or more information for that single article. So what we're going to do is we're going to create the archive or listing page. So we're going to say const article equals require models article. And I'm going to make this function async just so we can write some nicer looking syntax. And I'll say const articles equals article.find. And because we got a couple errors, I'm just going to do something that if we get an error, we're just going to return an empty array. And then I put the await syntax in front of it, so that way it will await for the promise to resolve. So this just returns all articles from the DB. So instead of doing res.send working, what we're going to do is render the article list page. So we're going to do res.render, and we're going to do articles/archive, and we're going to pass it articles. So right now we don't actually have an articles archive page. So articles is going to be the folder, and archive is going to be the name of the file. And it tries to find this under our views folder. So what I'm going to do is create a new folder called articles and create a file called archive.pug.
Does it matter if you put an extension or not?
Inside of here,
Can you put the extension?
you can. So you can do archive.pug. That's totally valid, but we don't have to because we say in our application that we're going to be using pug files. Now,
Is that standard though? You just don't do the extension?
in most applications that I've worked on, they don't specify it. I did work on an application once where we were switching from one templating engine to the other. So we had both at the same time. And in order to do that, you had to specify the extension that you were using. So, but most applications will typically only have one rendering engine, one templating engine inside of it. So let's
I
see.
just don't want someone to get confused by it being a path versus a file.
Yep, no, that makes sense. You can typically think like if it's the last thing, it usually means that it's a file, not a folder.
Okay.
But of course you can put the extension, totally fine. I will just actually leave it in there just to show that you can put it. So now I've created archive.pug. So we haven't worked, I don't think we haven't worked with any of our pug files in a folder before. So what you might think that you can do is just type extends layout like we have in our index file, but this in fact will not work. The reason for this is it uses relative pathing. So it will look in the current directory and say there's no layout file here, and it'll kind of error out. I'll show you just by doing this. So H1 not loading, save that, go to here, and we get no such file or directory open. And you see here that it's trying to look for layout.pug in the articles folder. So in order to fix this, we just use the relative pathing saying go back a folder, .. So go back a directory and grab the layout from there. And also you can put the extension in here as well. So you can say go back a directory and grab layout.pug. Now when I refresh, there we go. I wasn't refreshing. You'll see that now I get the H1 that says not loading that we had put in before. So, okay. So this is working correctly. What I now need to do is be able to have a way of showing the different articles that is in our application. So what I'm going to do is create a div called articles, and I'm going to use the for, I believe it's for in, for of loop. So we'll say for article of articles, or no, it's each. Hold on, there's so many different ways of doing loops in different languages. I always forget this. So I'm going to go to the pug.js documentation under iteration. It's each in. So it says each val in and then the array. So for each article in articles, I just want to do a paragraph tag saying this is an article. And we'll save that. So now when I refresh, we say this is an article because we have one article created. If I went to my database and then created a second document, and we'll just give it a title of this is the world's most interesting article, and insert that. So it's inserting. Surely one of these days is going to insert. Please tell me the internet's working. Yeah, it's still working for me. So I'm just going to try refreshing it, see what happens. Okay, so it did insert, it just didn't for some reason. It must have errored out in some sort of logic on the front end. So this is a good example. Nobody's perfect. Mongo Atlas can't write a fully working application without an error. So really, I don't expect you guys to, have everything working 100%. There is room for error in development. We always try to make stuff better. So now when I refresh, we have two, this is an article. And we'll just change it to being an H1. So I refresh, this is an article. But obviously this is not helpful. We don't want to say this is an article every single time that we have an article. So we're going to use its title property that's inside of it that says article.title. And you'll notice that the first article that we wrote actually did not have a title. So it'll skip over it. This is obviously not that great. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to give it a default attribute. So we'll say article.title or no title and save. Now when I refresh, we get no title, and this is the world's most interesting article. So that's okay, but when we're working in articles, typically we have a lot more information, which is why we set up this model that's right here. So we have a title, which is of type string, and it's required. We have authors, which can be multiple, we have a body, and then we have a date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to work on the page for being able to create a new article, because I can only do so much right now with displaying what isn't there. You'll notice, as I mentioned in last week's class, we made this strict model of saying that a title is a type string and it's required is true, but I was able to insert documents into MongoDB without having a title. That's because this model, this schema, is only valid inside of our application. Because Mongo is very loose, you can have attributes and not have attributes. It's not enforced on the database. It's just enforced inside of the application. So just be a little weary of that. It's good to know, just because, of course, if you're just trying to insert data manually and it doesn't work, that might be why, if you insert it manually and try to use it in your application. The other thing to also help with that is setting up a default attribute. So if I were to set up on this body, I have type is string and default is empty string. So now this will make it, if there's no body, it'll by default just be an empty string rather than not